Okay, today we will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on digital transformation initiatives, as well as the use of data in businesses. And we will take an exclusive look at the results of a new report, Experian 2021 Global Data Management Report, that will be released later this week. So we have an exclusive here. And to do this, I am joined by Steve Farr, who is the Director of Solutions for Experian Data Quality.
Good
Welcome.
afternoon, Bernard.
So nice to have you with me. So maybe you can share with the audience and anyone listening and joining us, and what you do for Experian and who Experian is before we dive into the
Sure.
content.
Well, let's start with the second part of your question. So, who are Experian? You'll probably know Experian from the adverts on TV, or those of you who travel still on the London Underground, the big adverts that take place there, which is our business to consumer side, where obviously we're helping you manage your credit score through a number of different services. Probably less well known is that is the B2B side, which is extremely important to us. And here we're looking after a number of areas. So the credit information services area of our business, which is really looking after all of that data about credit for the various banks and financial institutions and so forth that share their data with us. Another part of the business is an area of the business that we look at decisioning, so decisioning software. So when you apply for a loan, for example, what sort of information gets amalgamated to help a lender make that accurate decision about you. And closely related to that is what we call fraud and ID. So trying to make sure that those applications don't come fraudulently, and we can make a reasonable assessment of who you are, and indeed where you are and what device you're using, and those types of things. And then I work for EDQ, which is Experian Data Quality. Again, on that business-to-business side, where we're helping organizations look after the quality of their data, in particular, the quality of their contact data. So anybody who has a large number of customers will be a potential user of our services, our data services, and our software services to help them assess that quality.
Very good. So you've just published or you're just about to publish the report, so no one has seen this yet. So
Yeah.
how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected organizations' perception of data?
So I think that people's perception of data has firstly changed in that it's suddenly become much more important. We have many organizations now relying on data to keep themselves going. Their only interaction with their customers is digital. Everything else has gone away. And so data becomes the center of it. And then they start asking questions about, well, how good is my data, and can I trust it? These types of questions appear.
So, how did the pandemic impact organizations' ability to manage their data, for example?
Yeah, so I think one of the headlines of the piece is that something like 93% of organizations said that the pandemic created problems with managing data. And I wonder about the other 7%, to be perfectly honest, because what we have here is massive changes in at one end consumers and consumer behaviour. So first of all, we have issues about obviously where goods are procured. Footfall is massively down. Stores are closing. Stores are closed by government decree, and so on and so forth. So the whole of that footfall is moving to key fall, if you wish, on your PC. So that's the first thing, and then on the back end you have the supply chains, which are massively affected. And so here we're looking at well, am I actually able to deliver? Do I have the necessary contracts in place with the right people? And it's that old supply chain problem: can I get the right goods to the right people at the right time when suddenly there's this massive surge in demand? I think thirdly, you then got a change in consumer behavior. So initially, the mix of goods that we were all buying, and I'm sure that you can remember this too, Bernard, was quite different. Can I get hold of flour? Can I get hold of eggs and butter and basic staples? And people were stockpiling these goods. And then we move through to well, if I can do all of that basic stuff online, maybe I can do the complicated stuff online as well, and maybe I can do the esoteric stuff online. Why do I have to buy all of my stuff from Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Asda, when it's just as efficient to buy it direct from the supplier, for example? Now, in my case, that was a group of us lads who were quite interested in real ale, procuring directly from the breweries, which was fantastic. It was cheaper, took just as many clicks of a mouse. The transactions were secure, and why shouldn't we? So, I think there'll be a lag after this about exactly how we've changed things. So, for businesses, if you're going to supply and you're going to contact and you're going to serve your customers better, it's just all about the data now. How good is my data? Do I really know this customer? This came through particularly with a very large organisation in the UK who approached us with 90 million loyalty cards out there in the UK market. Well, there aren't 90 million consumers in the UK market, right? You've got a problem. Okay, you need to scrunch that data down and really find out who those people are and who those people who buy from you really are. And so these are the sorts of problems that pop down at woodwork.
Yeah, very good. Just having a little look through the stream, people joining us from all over the world. So welcome everyone. We've got Tim from Leipzig in Germany. We've got Shiva from India. We've got Stefan from Switzerland. We've got Umberto from Nicaragua, from someone from Morocco, South Africa, Ghana, Dubai, Saudi Arabia. So Algeria. It's lovely to see you all on here. Scott, hi Scott. Scott, the data whisperer, saying hello from sunny Florida. Nice to see you. According to your research, more organizations are looking to use data for good. This is something I'm extremely passionate about, but it's an interesting finding from the research. Why do you think this is?
So I think that the pandemic was a demonstration to us all about how data could be used for good. And I remember looking through my LinkedIn feed in the early days at all the people I knew from my company, from previous companies I've worked for, doing pro bono work, trying to analyze data on the pandemic itself, the spread of the pandemic and all those sorts of things, and then moving forward into, well, what effect is this having on commerce? What effect is this having on the environment? There's some fantastic work being done on sort of pollution levels and all these sorts of things, and people were chipping in and trying to help the world through their knowledge of how to aggregate data, join that data, analyze that data, visualize it, and all of those different data skills that are out there, which was fantastic. And I thought it was quite inspiring. It's quite, I'm part of that industry that's doing that good thing. That's quite nice. I think we also then had a phase of formalized requests, if you like. So, how can you help this particular governmental organization? How can you help this charity? Those sorts of things to actually help them overcome this. I mean, charities, massive problems with raising funds during the pandemic. Governments needed to, for example, understand in the UK vulnerable individuals. Okay, we have a list of people who we think will be vulnerable, and we would like all the supermarkets to deliver to them first, to give them the online shopping slots first. Well, who are those people? and if the data's no good, you're going to make mistakes, and then you're going to have complaints, and that's potentially going to be bad, for people's health. So I think all of a sudden you've got this sort of data for good sort of movement, and some of the stats are amazing. I think 84% or something like that of people said, yes, going forward after the pandemic, we want to continue to use our data for good. I think that's fantastic. But I could be the cynic in the house as well.
I was just about to say this. It almost sounds too easy to not say yes to, saying, of course, we'll be using data for good. But is this something that you're seeing on the ground? Do you have any favorite examples of where organizations might do this beyond the obvious, beyond the COVID healthcare and so on?
Well, we have a few that sort of surround us in Experian and our world of credit and those types of things. So obviously there's been credit holidays that have had to be pushed through the different financial institutions, and us as aggregators of those data have to make sure that data is absolutely pure and pristine, so that nobody has to pay for a debt that they don't have to pay for, and that's a very practical way. I think that other one, which was joining the loyalty data or the account data of a supermarket to a potential list of people who are vulnerable in society has been another one. And both of those things have been very practical for us, and for us in the EDQ part of Experian. I cast my mind back to 2008, 2009 and the financial crisis, and a lot of people were doing a lot of work at that point to try to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses had access to funds, because they didn't have access necessarily to loans from banks because of all that had gone away. And so large organizations really looked at their supply chains very, very carefully, and looked at who were vulnerable in their supply chains, and were very self-serving, really, in saying, well, we're going to help those people. We're going to provide payment holidays. We're going to provide financing directly, or whatever it happened to be, or amalgamate people in the supply chain into a single sort of credit union. But nobody hears about that anymore. Right? That was 12 years ago. And all that's gone away. I think it will be quite interesting to see in a couple of years' time where we are with the data for good movements. What I would say is that something that occurred to me while I was thinking about the report is that resiliency used to be something you did yourself. Your IT department, your finance department, your risk department did resiliency. I wonder whether you can do resiliency on your own anymore. I don't know. Maybe the next pandemic will be 30 years away, but maybe it'll be 2 years away.
The other thing that obviously the pandemic has created is this has been this catalyst for digital transformation. And where do you see this most visible, or which areas have organizations really prioritized for their digital transformation that you are seeing and the report is finding?
Well, retail has just been the one that's really blown us away. For the last probably 15 years, we've been talking about multi-channel retail, and that kind of got that got shrunk down again into one channel, and so that's what I think where we've seen the largest change happen. I think also that the industries where any sort of one-to-one interaction with the public has been necessary. So again, we're looking at organizations with very large numbers of customers. So I think those industries can really learn from the sort of mobile phone organizations and so on and so forth, who have a very small high street footprint over the years, um, and now seeing how they can do it themselves. Um, so yeah, I think that it's that movement to a single channel, that consolidation down, and that channel is just happens to be a digital channel.
And do you see this continuing? So we obviously have retail has moved to digital first
Yeah.
everywhere. How much, from your own experience, how much do you think of this will come back? Will we have this hybrid world, or will we actually will 80% of this remain digital? Will we see 90%, 50%? Have you got any ideas? What's your gut instinct there?
So I read a report over the weekend about predicted bounce back of hospitality. I mean, hospitality has suffered even more than retail, and yet that is expected to bounce back quite strongly. And I think there's been some share movement that was on the back of this report. Um, and I think we can certainly see that. Um, and similarly, travel, right? I mean, in my situation, we're dying to go on holiday and go somewhere nice, and as soon as it is safe. So I think there will be a definite movement back to those sectors. I think that the structural changes in retail have now been so large. I look at my own high street here in West London, and so many of the big names have gone, and what you're left with is a lot of hospitality. Actually, I mean, a lot of it's restaurants, because restaurants have stayed open. Um, so I think the structural changes to retail are much longer, are much longer term. Um, I think there was another thought there, which was what, um, travel coming back, but business travel obviously will be, I think, more long term effective. We're working through, as company policy, how we move back to work, moving back to more of a hybrid type environment, where people get the choice of um, staying in their kids' bedrooms and working there for the rest of time, or just spending a few days in the office, and those sorts of things. And so I think that will have wide-ranging impacts on, for example, the transport mechanism.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. For me, the key here is that we figure out where the value is. And I think
Mm,
for most retail, there isn't really a lot of value for me to go into a store to pick up stuff that now I live in Milton Keynes, where we have robots delivering these things to my house.
yeah,
That that is something we're using daily now, and I have no inclinations of going to any shop. However, there are some shops that I love to go into, especially when you're passionate about cooking, you want to touch things, see things.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that, for me, it's about experience, and this is why travel will come back big time, I
And
think.
hospitality, that's about
And
experience too. I like that.
hospitality,
Yeah,
these are
yeah.
the things people are missing. They want to socialize, they want to explore places, have real experiences. Whereas for retail, and this has been a transition that's been going on for a long time, even before COVID. I've been always been talking about this. Retailers really have to think about the experience and the added value they're offering, and there hasn't really been a lot of movement. So it feels very much commoditized, and it's now gone digital. So I guess with this whole digital transformation, we've also seen this increasing appetite for data.
Mm.
Um, do you see this as well? I mean, as soon as you digitize something, you then have a data stream on top of this you can
Yeah.
access, you can analyze, you can use. So how has this digital transformation increased the appetite for data?
Um, so I think there's been a couple of things, which is demand for systems and demand for people and skills has been the other two, has been the other one. So the thing about demand for systems, and we in Experian, we talk about data quality a lot, obviously, um, and data quality as it comes into the organization. So checking it as it comes into the organization. Did this consumer tell me the truth about who they are, for example? Did they provide everything I wanted to know about who they are? And is it in the right format? And all of that sort of quite dull data stuff, really. But then, how can I trust that data moving forward?
Mm.
And how do I know where to use that data? Is that data fit for this purpose, that purpose, all purposes? And so we see a huge amount of interest in data governance, data catalogs, data dictionaries to back up what's happening with data quality, because the data may be clean, but where is it and how can I use it? Those are sort of the next two logical questions you've got once you've cleaned things up. And I think on the skills side, I think one of the really large statistics in the sort of 80-90% in the survey that came through was that people were going to invest in people around data. And I think that's two things. I think that's bringing new people into organizations who understand data, who understand structures and so on and so forth. But I think it's also investing in the people that they have, data literacy, which I know is something that you've been involved in before.
Yeah, and this is a huge gap that I see. There's lots of gaps when it comes to really exploiting data. One is the general data literacy in the organization, so you can really start to democratize data and give people access to make their own decisions based on data. But then also the more advanced skills are lacking in most organizations, where
Mm.
we need the data science skills, we need data engineers, we need data architects to help us really use all of this data effectively.
Yeah,
So this is something that the report was showing.
absolutely. And I think that to that list, I would add domain experts. Um, the misalignment between the IT or technical functions and the functions of the business can be quite stark sometimes, and it leads people to say that they want to take control of their data. That's control is a big word, and it can be an emotive word within organisations as well. I think that what they really want to do is they want to place that semantic understanding on top of the data that they know about because they've been a supply chain manager for 20 years or an HR manager for 20 years or whatever it happens to be, and to place that onto the data, and to find what mechanisms to do that. Uh, and that's something that comes through quite strongly. I don't think that's a problem that's been solved yet, and it's something to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of organizations that I work with, we're trying to bridge the gap and create this domain expertise so the data science teams have a really strong link to the business side of the organization.
Yeah, yeah,
And we create job roles like data translators, for example, that make sure that they bridge those gaps and create the domain expertise within the data science teams.
absolutely, absolutely. And getting people to work cooperatively across teams is another thing. Right? You don't want the data science department. Well, I don't know. You might have a different opinion on this, but do you want the data science department to be a department, or do you want data science to be across the whole organization? Um, some people do it one way, some people do it the other. I go
Absolutely.
for the latter.
So pre-pandemic then, how sophisticated were businesses in the use of data, and has this shifted?
Um, so it's difficult to make generalities, but when we do make generalities, I think the one that's closest to the mark is good enough, with probably a watchword.
Mm.
Um, and I think that when probably 2005, 6, 7, when we started to see some of the real democratized analysis tools, the clicks, the tableaus, the Spotfires coming onto the market, we saw people go, okay, now I've got the data and I can chart it and graph it and understand it and trend it. I don't trust it. I know that's wrong. And so there was almost sort of this, I don't know, if if ClickTech or Tableau was the front screen, people wanted to then dive into the back of the machine and work out where it came from. And so there's been this sort of move backwards through organizations. I'm probably doing this the wrong way around because everything's transposed when you're on the screen. Move backwards into, okay, well, what does it say in the data catalog and what does it say in the data quality, and when was this data last cleaned? Who is this data from? Why should I trust this data at all? And so I think what we'll see is moving forward, because it's pushed by users, right? It's pushed by a marketing exec who wants to know the attribution of data behind their campaign. It's a supply chain manager wanting to know whether they've actually purchased against contract for the allotted time. They'll push that quality, that excellence piece back through the organization because now they can see it. And I think actually those tools were a great boon to us.
Yeah, and I think with those tools, hopefully came increased awareness of data skills, improved data literacy, which then allows you to question the data much more as
Yeah.
well. So you've now undertaken this study for 5 years. How has the level of data quality changed over this period?
I think that going back a couple of years, we started to see a frustration appearing around the control of the data, this whole control thing. That was a very, very strong trend a couple of years ago, in that people had invested quite a lot in tooling in IT to improve the situation, and yet end users weren't seeing it. And so, to a certain extent, they were going rogue. Right? Well, I'll get the data. I'll mash the data together. I'll work out what's right with it, what's wrong with it, and those sorts of things. I'll load it all into Excel and write some clever formula. So I think that was coming through a couple of years ago. I think that this year is almost, I hope, an extraordinary year, right? Because the whole thing's been just dominated by COVID. What everyone's talking about with everything on any subject, and so why should it be any different here? But again, hopefully this is gonna crank up the pressure again on the quality of data within organizations.
Absolutely. So what are the potential repercussions of poor data quality for organizations?
So it does depend who you are and what you're doing. I mean, we work with, obviously mentioned retailers and utilities and banks and all sorts of organizations. We also work with police forces, for example. Now, usually people think about the implications of bad data quality being a cost to your organization. I didn't send the goods to the right location. They got sent back, and that return costs me money. Damage to reputation, damage to consumer loyalty. These sorts of things are reasonably well known and well understood. And then, of course, there's the added cost of going in the back systems and fixing it and maintaining it over time. Because as soon as you acquire a new customer, as soon as Miss Smith becomes a customer, 2 years later she gets married and changes her name to Mrs. Jones, right? So you've got to keep it up to date all the time. So there's a kind of fixed cost in there as well. But I think moving into some other sorts of organizations, the implications of data quality could be really quite serious. Machines can fail, oil rigs can blow up. We've seen examples of that over the last 10, 15 years. If you're a police force, the person ringing in looking for assistance may not be identified quickly enough because, again, Mrs. Smith rings up and she's having some sort of incident, she wants some sort of response, and you've got not just 50,000 Mrs. Smiths on the database, but some of those are the same Mrs. Smith, because sometimes she calls herself Amanda, sometimes she calls herself Mandy, sometimes she's Mrs. A. Smith, and so on and so forth. And so really sort of being able to very quickly pin down will give you a much more immediate response. So you get into that sort of real-time world of, do I know who this person is? Now, in the data quality world, we call that data accuracy, but when we talk about people, we talk about identity. And what is it that we can do to improve the analysis of data to come to some sort of concept of identity? I've got a whole bunch of data. I might have a whole bunch of data about this glass of water, for example. You can see that right in the camera. But unless I verify it against the real glass of water here, I can never really know that that data is representative of that glass of water, or so on and so forth. And similarly with a person, unless I go up and talk to them, and measure them, and take biometric data and so on and so forth, I can't really understand who that person is. And so the only way you can do it is through acquiring more and more information about that person as they interact with you, as they interact with others, and bringing that into the mix in a sensible way. Unfortunately, we have the systems and the processes that are fast enough to do that now. Looking at billions of pieces of data.
Very good. So agility has been key to the survival during the pandemic. What does your research tell us about businesses' ability to be agile?
I think that I think businesses were looking very, very carefully and more frequently at the analysis that they were getting from their data. And again, it just cranks up the pressure. It's like a sort of pressure pot of data. It's like, what's the market telling us? Not this quarter, but today. Which products and services are more or less popular? Where are we having logistics issues today? Not not this month. Oh, we didn't do very well in Milton Keynes last month. That's no good anymore, right? We're not doing very well in Milton Keynes today. Then we need to bring more logistics online and so on and so forth. So I think that agility was really pushed by the very real possibility that people would go under, that their businesses would fail. That if they didn't protect their customers and didn't hold on and make those customers really, really loyal to them, that would be tragic for their business. You can see small retailers thinking, well, well, everybody's just going to go to Tesco's or everybody's just going to go to Sainsbury's and I'll never be able to sell my stuff anymore. Okay? Which is in fact experience. We have small shops down the road near to me here where they've started doing click and collect, right? I mean, just literally one-person shops doing click and collect, investing in the technology, getting out there, making sure that they can still have at least a reasonable proportion of their existing customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So that for me, agility has been absolutely critical, and data, especially as you say, the move to using data as an asset that allows you to have more real-time interactions, more real-time understanding of stock levels, so you can offer these click and collect services. So actually understanding exactly what is happening at this point in time and having accurate data is vital. How how do you make sure as Experian, for example, to make sure your data is accurate? Because I was reading through the stream, and you always get people saying, "Okay, how do you can you actually break it down to a single score when you score people and so on?" So how do you make sure that the data you have, the data you sell, is really accurate?
Um, so we are, we're a regulated organisation, and there are lots of compliance rules that we have to abide by. But we also extend the world of rules out to all the people who are supplying us with data. So people say, Experian, you've got lots of data. Well, actually, we've got lots of other people's data. Okay, we bring it together for different purposes. One of which being obviously the credit scoring piece. The rules that we have on each set of data that's coming into our organisation are extensive. I mean, I've been involved over the last year or so with a project where there's over 200 different rules that get applied to the data before it gets onto our servers. What does this field contain? Does this field plus this field equal that field? And what's in the header? What's in the footer? Does it agree with other data that's in the body of the data file? And are there any nulls in this? And are there any flags on that? And it's reasonably complex stuff. By making sure that you have those sorts of rules when you're acquiring data, and this doesn't just apply to an Experian, but anybody, you have that gateway to say, does this data apply to my rules that I want it to apply to? Then you can start off from a position of quality. You've then got to think about what the age of that data is, and different data will age at different rates, and you have to have policies for that. You just have to understand that if I've got, I don't know, if I've got 100 records saying that this person is called Miss Smith, but I've got 5 new records saying that they're called Mrs. Jones, that person you probably need to check to see if that person's just got married, right? So those sorts of things. Or similarly, if I've got some brand names attached to products in a product database that are more than 20 years old, yeah, I've probably changed those brand names by now. I mean, not many brands last that long, really. So all sorts of rules can be applied to that sort of aging of data. But then the last set of rules are really where the data is going to, something we quite often call data movement. And that movement might be inside your organization, or it might be to somebody else, a supply chain partner, and that sort of. And there'll be a new set of rules that apply to that. What are those people allowed to see? In what format do they want to see it? If I've got on my ERP system 30 different fields that say stock balance, which is quite a realistic thing to have because stock balance means different things to different people at different times, which stock balance do they want to see? That person compiling that report, for example. You mentioned stock balances. Is it everything I've got in my warehouse today? Or is it everything I've got in my warehouse today plus what I've got on order? Or is it everything I've got in my warehouse today plus what I've committed, or less what I've committed, and so on and so forth, right? So another set of rules for data movement.
Very good. We were talking about agility before, and how important it is for organizations to be agile, to be able to respond to the ever-changing environment. And you talked about data, the, how accurate the data is, but also how fresh the data is. So shelf life of data, I think, is really important. And lots of the clients that I work with, they have realized that the shelf life is actually decreasing all the time, especially during the pandemic, where consumer behavior suddenly shifted so quickly that
Yeah.
especially retailers that used to look at 3 months buying patterns now look at weekly buying patterns to really understand what is happening. So what are some of the things that are preventing organizations from being more agile?
Um, so I think that there are problems with um, not just the shelf life. So you can appreciate the shelf life of data, but do you also appreciate the shelf life of your model? So in data science, we talk about building models, and how adaptive are those models to the new data that comes in, and how do you want to change what you're doing according to the evidence that you're getting? And I think that causes a friction within organizations. If I have a churn model, for example, and I'm pretty happy with that churn model, and that churn model's worked for me for 10 years or so. When I start to get radically different data, how much do I want to change the model? How much should I change the model? And how often should I um, reevaluate the model against the previous model? Because things might go back, right? So we might go back to steady state, in which case we could afford to do that. But I think you've got a really interesting point there, which is that what we used to think was steady state in our businesses and didn't need a lot of attention, all of a sudden does need a lot of attention. And I wonder whether we've lost some of the sort of institutional knowledge about how we got to where we are sometimes. Why do we do it that way? Okay. Why do we offer those discounts to those people in these circumstances? Where is that documented? And so again, it sort of drives into this sort of data governance piece, where data governance is not just what am I doing today, but what did I do in the past?
Absolutely. And again, having this domain expertise and being able to challenge this, you need both. You need the data literacy to understand what data you're using, what models you're using to come up with the decision making, but you
Yeah.
also need to have the domain expertise to challenge this somehow and say, actually, is this really giving me the right answer?
Yes.
So we don't end up in this black box situation where we have great algorithms making decisions on our behalf that we don't understand, and they might be using the wrong data.
Exactly. We come across this all the time with deduplication. Okay? And for a long time, we've depended on fuzzy logic to do deduplication. And well, my previous example, Amanda looks like Mandy. That could be the same. John gets misspelt as JHON sometimes, and so you've got a transposed character in there, and you can sort these problems out using fuzzy logic, and we've been able to do that for a whole amount of time. But then you get with relatively sophisticated data sets, and customer data sets are quite sophisticated. Right? You've got an inbuilt structure into a customer file, which is full of address details and emails have formats, and unique identifiers will have formats, and so on and so forth. You will quite often have people say, well, I've got two records here and you've told me that they're duplicates, but I don't think they are. And you say, well, okay, why don't you think they are? And they might come up with a good reason, they might come up with a bad reason. But then they might have two others and they say, well, I think those two are a duplicate, and your system's telling me they're not. How can I reconcile what people think and their domain expertise, if you like, with what my system is producing when it tries to do some fuzzy logic matching and comes up with a set of rules to do fuzzy matching logic, and so on and so forth. And so one of the things that is really quite interesting is how you bring AI to machine learning to solve that problem, and particularly supervised learning, to set people up in front of screens and say, do you think those two records are duplicate? If you do, press yes. If you don't, press no. And take them through that process, so that what you end up with is more trust in the end. And you probably end up with a set of rules for deduping your records, which are much more sophisticated than you could ever guess at, simply by saying, oh, no, this is a retailer, or this is a police force, or this is a utility.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really interesting area.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and one where AI can make a real difference, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the key takeaways then for business leaders from this pandemic?
I think that I would like to go back to that point of resiliency. And what does resiliency really mean for your organization? And is it something that you sincerely think that you can do yourself? Can you do it without understanding your customers in a very agile way? And can you do it without business partners in your supply chains, other data providers, free data that's out there? And if the answers to those questions are no in any respect, then you really ought to take this data for good piece seriously. We can't predict when the next big problem is going to happen. It might be a week away. It might be another 12 years away. Do you want to be the person in charge when you say, oh, we didn't think it would happen?
Yeah,
I don't think we're going to get away with that one again. And I hope not, actually, for the good of all of us.
it definitely has done a huge lot of good for organizations in terms of creating this resilience, the agility, the digitization of their organizations that will hopefully make it less vulnerable in the future. So how are business leaders acting on some of these learnings they're getting? Where do you see them investing?
So I can only talk to for my organisation, really. I mean, obviously, I've given some examples of what some supermarkets are doing and police forces are doing, and those sorts of things. But within that, with our organisation, we're looking very carefully at how we serve our customers better, and how we enable our staff to do so, because it's the face-to-face interaction hasn't gone away, and the interaction between people in our teams hasn't gone away, although we're all stuck in bedrooms and kitchens and doing all those sorts of things. And so in order to make this sort of new hybrid world work as well as possible, my organisation is certainly, and I think a lot of organisations are across the world, are putting an awful lot of effort into how do we now make this work permanently. We've scrapped through, we've kind of got to a plateau of productivity. But what does that mean really moving forward? And what does it mean for the care of our employees and the welfare of our employees moving forward? And what's their mental state like? And what's the state of their backs and their RSI? And all of these sorts of things come into it. And what's going to be a good organization to work for in the future? For my son's 17, so he'll be on the job market in a few years' time. What constitutes a good employer? And I think that changes as well. So there are some big conclusions to be got out of this, and I think a whole bunch of them, despite the big tragedy that's happened, are very positive.
Absolutely. So we talked about data quality and agility as
Yep.
key things organizations need to get right. So where are businesses investing in those fields of data quality and agility?
So I think the biggest area of investment that we see is to look at the profit generating data, which is usually customer data. And we see that if you want to get a project off the ground, you mentioned the word customer. It's all about customer satisfaction. It's all about our customer data. It's all about delivering to our customers faster or making better offers more timely and those sorts of things. So that's really what you need. You need to include that word in order to get a project running. And especially data science projects, I think is particularly true.
I couldn't agree more. I think if the word customer doesn't appear in it, there's something seriously
exactly. Because at the end of the day, that's the only place we get money from. We may think we get money from other places, but really we only get money from customers. And so looking after those people is really, really important. So the very most important data set in the organization is the customer master. And how full is that customer master? How clean is it? What's included, what's not included? How often do I clean it? How much do I trust my organization, my algorithms, my reference data sets, as opposed to the customer themselves to keep that record clean? Because now, of course, it's an online relationship. And if I come on, I mean, it says on the screen here, Steve Farr, but if I come on tomorrow and say, my name's Stephen Farr, that's my choice. And that is me. I just chose to call myself something different today. Right? We humans are a problem because we do that sort of naughty non-data thing. What's important now within the customer master is to expand the intelligence of that customer master so that it can take into account that sometimes I like to call myself Stephen. And sometimes I like to include my middle initial. And sometimes whatever it is I do as a squidgy, illogical lump of carbon and water, right? As opposed to a machine, right? Machines, give me machines every day, right? They're that tall, they're that wide, they're that high, etc. Very, very easy to measure. So the expansion of that customer master to include diversity, and I mean diversity in a sort of strictly data way rather than the other way, is really, really important. That's going to give us understanding. If I'm a gambling organization and someone has told me 10 times that they've got a gambling problem and come onto my site at 2 o'clock in the morning through a new device, call themselves something slightly different with a slightly different email address, I've got a responsibility towards that person. I know I have a responsibility towards that person, and I can't blame the data. I go, yeah, go on. Have another flutter. Those sorts of things. So the customer master.
Very good. Just another lots of people joining us from all over the world. They're saying hello, which is always highly appreciated. We've got Giovanni from Costa Rica. We've got Juan from Argentina. We've got someone from San Francisco. We've got Jenny from the US. Christian from Denver, and Salmir from Brazil. So thank you so much for saying hello.
Yeah, thank you.
If you have any more questions for Steve, just pop them into the comment functions and we will try to address some of them. If not, let us know what you think about the session, and please leave your comments on whether this was useful or not useful. I'm always interested to hear this. Um, in terms of the research, so we are now having this exclusive look at the Experian 2021 data management report. That is, when is this officially being launched? Is it tomorrow or later this week?
I believe it is today, or it might be tomorrow.
Yeah.
It'll go up on the website tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So anyone who wants to find out more about this, how do they get hold of the report?
So if you go on to experian.co.uk, you can find out some more on it there. Also, edq.com, which is a site dedicated to Experian Data Quality. You'll find some information on there. And indeed, you'll be able to be invited to a webinar that we're giving, which goes through the report findings in a lot more detail. I can't remember all of the stats off the top of my head, but if you want all of the stats, that's the place to go.
Very good. So thinking about the research as a whole,
Mm.
what would you say are some of the key takeaways for business leaders?
Um, we talked about accelerating digital. We've just seen that massively happen this year, but you know, it may slow a little, but it'll still get bigger. And that move to digital, because that's all you can rely on right now. Um, I think the investment in data and people is the second thing. So we're seeing people bringing on new reference data sets, bringing on people, investing in people, and investing in systems around data quality and governance. And because to speak to your point about Agile, then we're going, wow, we need to do something about this, we need to do something quick. And I think that's been really important. I think that um, the, the data for good thing has come through very, very strong in this year's research, and not really something that we picked up in the previous 5 years. And I mentioned before, that COVID has been a demonstration about what can happen. I would say to business leaders, take that on board and think about how your organization can be more agile and more resilient if you cooperate more. I think that's a really good thing, because whether it's related to it or whether it's a fourth point, I don't know, but there is that thing about the future, right? What happens next time? We've had 12 years of relative comfort, 11 years, 2008, 2009, financial crisis, relative comfort, relative recovery and growth. And now things have hit the floor. How long between before the next one? And you know, do you want to be, as I said before, the person who's in charge when you said, we didn't think it would happen?
Yeah, very, very good point. And I think creating a really agile organization that is nimble, that understands their customers well, that uses data to serve them better, increasingly more personalized and more real time.
Yeah.
They are the businesses that will thrive in the future.
Somebody used an anecdote the other day, which was, the Titanic was unsinkable. If it had better steering, though, it might have survived.
Yeah, and the thing is, the next big thing is something that we probably can't predict, because you just never know what's going to
Yeah.
happen. Even though people had pandemics on their radar, did really many businesses plan for this? Not really.
There were a few false starts, weren't there, in the, sort of around SARS time and stuff like that. So bird flu.
Very good. Thank you so much, Steve, for your time today.
Thank you
Anyone
for that.
to see the research, head to the website, head to Experian and search for the 2021 data management. Is it data management report? Yeah.
Yeah, data management report.
Yeah, perfect. Anyone who wants to re-listen to this conversation, you can always get this on my YouTube channel, or you can listen to many other conversations on exciting topics around digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and data with some amazing thought leaders that you can rewatch on the channel. You can also subscribe to my podcast where you can listen to this episode in the future too. And other than this, I hope you have an enjoyable rest of your day, and hopefully, I will see you soon. I've got two more live streams coming up this week. One is with Mike Kanan on Wednesday, where we will talk about artificial intelligence. Mike works for the US Air Force, is an amazing thinker, was heading up the AI work for them, and we'll talk about where we are with AI, where this is all going. And on Friday, I will meet up digitally with Bruno Aziza from Google, where we'll look back at the month in tech and data science and see what happened. So join us there. Until then, I will see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.